Welcome to Lockbox, a podcast providing real estate professionals with action items for success. My name is Jeffrey Brogger, and I'm going to be your host. I'm the founder of two real estate marketing and tech companies, STEEZY.Digital and realnurture.io. In this podcast, you'll learn from top 1% real estate and mortgage brokers the exact secrets to their success. Welcome to Lockbox. Welcome. I am Jeff Brogger, and I am here today with Michael Vervena. Thank you for being here.
Hey, thank you for having me. This is great.
Absolutely. So why don't you tell our listeners who you are and where you're from?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, my name's, as you said, Michael Vervena. I work for a company called Planetar, which we are the makers of iGUIDE. So it's a 3D capture mapping technology that maps out homes, gives you floor plans, room measurements, and all the information that you need to list a property. Just to give you a little bit of background on myself, I've been working in this industry for the last 4 years. Previous to that, I was in consumer packaged goods doing marketing, sales, product development. And I got into, consulting with small businesses when I left that world, small to medium-sized businesses, and helping them with their sales and marketing and leveraging my network to help them just really grow their sales. And got connected with iGUIDE and been here for, the last 4 years, really helping them to drive their business and grow our platform across Canada, North America, the US, and worldwide. So it's been fun.
Yeah. And what got you into the real estate industry? Do you have any type of background in real estate prior to entering it 4 years ago?
Yeah, working as a consultant, I did do that for a few years, and that's how I got into this. But that was probably my second stint into the world of real estate. My both parents are in the real estate. My mom was an agent, and my dad's been a broker for 50 years. And so when I was 18, ended up working for him for between high school and university, and got my license when I was 18. Really wasn't sure what I was doing, but it was fun. It was a great experience really to understand the industry. And now that I'm back in it, reflecting back on that history, it really demonstrated the challenges and the competitiveness of this industry. So it's just interesting to be back into it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that early experience has probably paid dividends as you then became a consultant, and then now you're with iGUIDE. That just having done a real estate transaction, having, gotten your license and gone through that process, even though it was a while ago, all of that experience accumulates and adds up. And then you're able to offer insights based on your other experience after that to kind of bring it all full circle, I would imagine. Does that sound right?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess growing up in terms of sales and marketing over the years, you start to see, or you're able to better connect the dots in terms of how everything works together. And, it's been dynamic in how fast the marketing has changed. The fundamentals of sales and marketing are the same, but the processes and the tactics are, have changed quite a bit. And it's pretty exciting. And that's why I love this space, is because it's very dynamic. I don't think the real estate professional industry gets enough credit for how willing they are to try and adapt, not only new technology, but new approaches, and to put themselves out there to really market themselves. It's really an interesting bandwidth of people from, one spectrum to the next that are willing to try and experiment.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of agents are almost notorious for chasing a shiny new object, but in that process, you're still discovering, you're open to learning, you're trying new things, you're seeing what sticks. And that is true that a lot of agents and brokers out there are willing to give something a shot, even though they're bombarded with so many things on a daily basis of, hey, purchase this, buy this, do this, because they're at the center of a massive life event transaction. So, with that being said, it's sometimes difficult for them, I think, to decipher what to say no to, what to say yes to. So, when it comes to iGUIDE, it seems like from my outside perspective that it's one-time purchase that you can then use throughout, your business as a real estate agent, and it creates like top view maps of homes when you're about to list them. And I'm sure that there's many more. I'm sure I butchered the description, so I want to let you kind of describe what it is to you. But that's my outside perspective of it, which is really cool because I know that a lot of brokerages, they have overhead every month for videographers and for this and for that. And Matterport and 3D technology has become so much more important now, especially post-COVID or, during COVID, when there's out-of-state buyers or there's people local that don't want to show up to an open house. but they want to be able to go online and kind of virtually view the home, right? It's almost become a new standard to have that type of technology implemented for every listing. And so what is iGUIDE? Go ahead and, take a couple minutes, describe it, and, why would a broker be interested in implementing something like this in their business?
Absolutely. I think you hit a couple key points there. Maybe before I jump into iGUIDE, it just kind of what's happening in the industry. I know that when we started out of Kitchener-Waterloo area in Canada, and quite quickly have done well across Canada in terms of growing adoption of, a lot of top agents using our technology to market and sell a home. And I think the biggest point for it is that it's providing the information for buyers to really understand that property, to see if that's of interest to them, if it's going to work for them and their family, and just being a better qualified lead. What the industry, you've seen in the movement just prior to COVID, there was this big push, and coming from the consumer packaged goods world, never heard this industry as a whole talk about, I'll use the term consumer that often. It was the technology a lot of it was speaking to the industry as a whole, but quite quickly, Amazon came into the industry. Zillow, moved from being a disruptor to the incumbent. And why did they do that? Is because they were putting the information that consumers wanted to see online. They were catering to the consumer as a whole and providing better information. And when you go to these search portals and you're looking for a home, you get tremendous information about that area, that neighborhood, really understanding, what's the walk score, what's the schools look like. I know that I want this area. And then all of a sudden you zoom into trying to determine if a property is right for you. And it's kind of a mixed bag of what you get. You have $1 million home with 2 pictures on it, or you have, another property that has all this great information and you're intrigued and interested and you want to go look at it and you're more interested in, discovering more about that property. Well, that's what we've been doing as a company. We've been empowering really people to make informed decisions about their space, if it's in the commercial world or if it's in the residential real estate world. And we'll stay on that residential real estate because that's where we're primarily working in. We're giving a tool to an agent to better sell and market a home. And that's really providing a lot of value to the home seller in terms of the agent doing their best to provide that information forward. And why is it good information? The iGUIDE it's a 3D walkthrough, but it is also an iframe, like a YouTube video, which encapsulates everything you would have in a single property website. So you have all the key information buyers are looking for when they're shopping for a home online. And that's the big thing, is that they can really dive deep into that property. They spend more time in understanding if that property works for them. And it provides the biggest things that they want to see. You look at these beautiful real estate photos, and that does capture people's attention because, my wife and I are constantly looking for a home. We live in Toronto. It's impossible to find a home that's ideal. And when they look around the home, and if the photos aren't great, my wife's not even interested in looking at the property, but I'm like, no, but the bones are good. Let's go. Let's look at it. But she's not interested. So that grabs your attention. But really to understand, those photos are sometimes deceiving, what the sizes of the rooms are, how does that home fit and flow? It's adding things like the accurate and detailed information about the property. And that's room sizes, area calculations of the home. That's tied to the value of the home. And floor plans, in Zillow rates floor plans as number 2, what consumers want to see, because it then understands how that home fits and flows for me. Is it going to work for me and my family? Is my baby's room close to my bedroom? Is my teenager's room far from my bedroom, right? And so, that it provides that information, and people spend more time on the listing, are more likely to reach out to agents and talk about those properties, and they're going to be better qualified buyers at the end of the day. So iGUIDE really encapsulates all that information you're seeing. Sorry that I can't demo one here for you.
No, that's all right. But that makes total sense. And I do resonate with the fact that consumers want to see floor plans. Yeah. So not just a 3D Matterport, but the next step of an actual floor plan with dimensions, with, feet and inches of every room. Like, they want to see how it flows, how big each room is, and start to visually think about, how that property makes sense outside of just the photos. As you mentioned, photos, videos, that can attract attention. But then to get them to, interact and spend a lot of time on this listing and make that decision to go see it, they want to see additional information, which iGUIDE seems to be providing, which is great.
Yeah.
And
you can deliver all that content together.
And it's off Zillow. That's another benefit, I would say, is this hosted on behalf of the agent? Like they get their own kind of like iGUIDE login or like a one-page website for the listing. Like how does that work?
So yes, I guess how we work we have a camera system that quickly maps out spaces using a LiDAR or laser. That data is uploaded to our team here in Kitchener where we draft out those properties. We follow a methodology of measurement. So what you're getting back is not only, all these great marketing assets, but you're getting accurate and detailed information about that home. And we're following a method of measurement. So we do studies where we're comparing our data versus tax data. And quite often, previous listing data, previous tax data, or tax data on the square footage of the home is inaccurate. And so, when you're providing information to consumers, if you're buying a property and 90% of homes that are sold are used properties, are you providing good information about that property? So, if I sold you a used car and you asked me, how many miles are on that car? And I said, well, somewhere between 60 and 80,000 miles. You would kind of question, well, why am I buying a car from you? What is the actual data that you're providing? And so that's a big part of the services that we're providing is we're following a methodology of measurement. We're providing those accurate numbers. And yes, in terms of a marketing tool, you encapsulate all that great info that you want. The agent puts that link into the MLS and it'll populate on Zillow right underneath the top picture with a 3D tour link. And then it'll have your video, your photos, all that information that you want. So it's a great marketing tool. But,
it's uploaded in the MLS and it does go to Zillow, but it enhances their listing.
Yeah. So really how we go to market is a lot of agents will use real estate photographers or marketing companies that use our services, and then they will deliver that content via the iGUIDE.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense. And this seems like a pretty futuristic, cutting edge type of technology where you're giving the consumer what they want. And, the future is now. So I don't say that as, a delay to get something like this for the brokers out there. But the point is that consumers want information now. They're used to finding it online. They've been trained that way. They've voted that this is what they want based on their engagement on platforms like Zillow and Redfin, the ones that we are constantly as agents and brokers fighting nowadays for the eyeballs, right?
Absolutely.
The consumer has said, I want this, which is instantaneous data that is accurate and making decisions on my own prior to showing up. And this is not only on the buy side, but also on the listing side, the sell side. How much is my home really worth, right? And so on the purchase side, the consumers using this type of system would be able to much more accurately find out that data and make those decisions sitting at home, with the couple before planning out that weekend of open houses or the things that they're going to. So I think it's a no-brainer. Makes sense to me. I'm curious what you think the next 5 to 10 years look like for the industry, right? What are your projections on where the industry is heading?
Good question. If I knew the future, I'd be probably a richer man. But I think, truthfully, what I've seen in the industry just in the last few years, even prior to COVID, there's this adoption of using better marketing and being able to use that marketing to show value to your clients. And I think that's just going to continue to grow. And I think all that COVID did was brought an underlying trend to the forefront. And, I think the peak we saw, the amount of marketing that was used on a property had dramatically increased last year in the last spring, had dropped down, but the new normal is much higher than where it was before. And so I think it's just going to continue to be able to, top agents. And that's what, a lot of the top agents that I speak to is that they're trying to bring more professionalism to the brand. They're trying to leverage their relationships with these marketing and real estate photography companies to keep focused on their key, activities, to leverage those partnerships to provide better information, for the sellers. And I think where it's going is just you're going to continue to see better quality information out there. I think another thing that we talk about often, and we're seeing it in some markets around North America, is stuff is things like measurement data, having accurate measurement data. I think the whole industry wants to smoothen out that whole buying transaction process. And so if you take where you have all this information up front, where you have an iGUIDE with accurate floor plans and measurements of a home, and you can go through it and see what the appliances and the state of condition of the home are. Now, can you pass that along to the mortgage broker and they could do a desktop mortgage approval? Can you pass that along to the insurance? And so now, how do we smoothen out this whole transaction for this whole buying process? And I think that's, where I think a lot of the push in the industry is trying to make this whole transaction a better and smoother process. Can you use some of the technology that's already being out there to make that transaction easier? And I think that's where I would say things are starting to go. The AVMs for, Zillow on the Zestimate or, other companies that are using that, they're using data, and then there's a number of factors that go into the value of home. Sure, location, state and condition, lot size. But one of the big factors is the size of the home. And so that, putting in bad data and getting bad data out, or putting in good data and getting good data out, I think is going to be more and more relevant and more important, not only to, as we talked about earlier, to the buyers and to the sellers, because they don't want to be shortchanged on either side, but to the companies that are offering up these these AVMs and the valuations on the homes.
Right. And this is kind of in line with one of my questions that I don't ask all the time, but do you think that the real estate transaction will be 100% automated by 2030? Meaning no agent, right? That's a big fear.
I don't know. I mean, from my experience, there's so many, you've seen over the last 20 years or the last 10 years, actually, still one of the top things that people hire an agent for is to help sell and market their home. And that's definitely diminished. But there's so many other aspects to selling a home and helping people through that transaction and that process that is, I think, that the real estate professional brings to the table, and the ability to use all these different technologies to help them through that process. I think it's still invaluable. So you're going to have people who want to, get a cash offer on their house because they're in a market that's not selling fast, and they'll want to deal with Open Door and just get that price, and they're going to lose value out of their home for that, but for the ease and convenience of it. But there's still, on the other side of it, there are people that want to be, like any industry, customer service is one, two, helping me through this transaction and process, helping me negotiate, how do I make all these decisions? I have people I've talked to in the last summer that have used an agent that told me in the past that they didn't necessarily see the value in using an agent, and they just sold their home. So there's two cases that just personally, and they used an agent. And I was curious as to why. And they were so stressed out with this home selling and buying process that one was my neighbor. I had never seen him in this state before, that you could see he was agitated about this whole process. They had lived in the home there for, I think, 18 years. And it was a stressful process going through this. And I think, the agent helped them through that process. And I think they looked to a professional to help them through the process. There's a lot of decisions to be made. And it's the same thing. I could save if I'm going to, pick out fixtures and design, a new home that I'm building. I can pay a designer to help me narrow down those choices and walk me through that process and say, hey, this works better with this. And it makes life easier. We can stay focused on what we do best, and whatever that is, right?
Right. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you see a segment of the market will go to those iBuyer platforms. But even long term, people are going to want the customer service and the agency representation, and that the brokers could actually just be using the tools like this to provide them better customer service rather than the tools themselves replacing the broker or the agent. Is that right?
Yes. Sorry if I wasn't clear on that, but
no, yeah, I just like to clarify for our listeners. I think we were very clear.
Yeah, I think it's there's a lot of value brought there to the table, and that's invaluable, and it's not always necessarily tangible. So I think that's what some of the challenges are for real estate professionals is how do they show the value to their clients, and things like, we provide analytics on our tours. And so it's just one small thing, but you can go back to show your client that, hey, this is what I did for you. This is how I marketed your home. This is the process I walked through. And, after that sale, make them feel good about the value that you brought to the table so that that client is your next referral, and I think, these tools are all tools to help the agents do a better job and stay focused on those key routines, those activities that help them drive their business, as opposed to, doing the photos themselves and trying to run their digital advertising and trying to run all these different aspects of their business. This is why you leverage, even companies like, your company, like STEEZY, right? You leverage that because you're the expert in that field. You're going to get me more bang for my buck. And I'm going to stay focused on following up on those leads and, building relationships with my clients. Same thing with what our providers do is, they're the partner. They're going to come in, they're going to tell you how to make this home look amazing, how to market that home. And then we just give you the tools to now reshare that, get more people into that home, bolster those analytics, get more people visiting that home so that you can show more value to your clients. And I think there's just a great opportunity out there, I think, for the agent to grow with the industry.
Yeah, I agree. And using the right tools to be able to focus on what they do best, which is the actual client conversation, the interpersonal communication, this following up, building relationships, that's really what the agents, the brokers should be doing. And I agree with you. Thanks for the comment on STEEZY.Digital. That's exactly why we help them with all the digital stuff when it comes to paid advertising, driving traffic. We actually don't create content per se. We're not the media company that goes in and shoots the home. But once that asset is created, we then use it to drive traffic, generate leads, and sell the home, but also generate more transactions out of it. And if the broker were to try and go learn and implement all the things that we do, it would not be a valuable use of their time. And then that comes right back to what iGUIDE's offering. It's like these are things you can use to leverage your time, offer incredible value to the consumer, and still focus on what you do best, right? And get a massive ROI from it. So that makes total sense. I'm curious, being in the midst of a company at a high level, entrepreneurship is very similar to being a real estate agent, as I'm sure that one summer, that one transaction, and then, what you do nowadays as a consultant and an entrepreneur. There's a lot of similarities there, the kind of like eat what you kill mentality and, a lot of discipline, setting your own schedule, all those things. So I'm curious, what is the single most important action that you take on a daily basis that has attributed most to your success?
I think you kind of mentioned one thing at the beginning is, getting distracted by, I guess, squirrels or whatever the latest and greatest thing is. I think good routines where you schedule and focus on your, I call leading indicator activities, and I did this when I was consulting. Now that I'm full-time with Planetar and with the sales team, my internal sales team, it's focusing on and scheduling in those things that are going to move the needle for you. So, you have those lag indicators that you're going to get to, but what are the activities that are going to get you there? And it's, it's following up on the leads. It's making those calls. It's doing those activities that are going to move the needle for you, and don't get caught up or distracted with, all the other things. I think it's scheduling it in. And I think that's probably my biggest thing, is making it a routine. I think this year, just to be completely honest, has been tough. A routine has been disrupted, and then it almost got boring in terms of, because I came into the office today, but I was living, and we were in lockdown until about a week ago. And so I've been in my basement for the last year, right? And, not seeing the sunshine. And so routine can get boring. And so, but that's the activities that you focus on and schedule those in so you don't get distracted from them. That's been what I see for my sales team, for myself. That's probably the best thing that you could do.
Yeah. I mean, I get excited when someone says leading indicators or KPIs. So that's definitely speaking my language. Can you identify what a leading indicator would be for you? I mean, you can be as specific, because obviously you're attempting to acquire brokerages or agents. And even though those are pretty much the listeners that are out there, I'm sure that they can take a KPI that you're focusing on and apply it to their own business. So for example, for me, it could be marketing qualified leads in the form of strategy sessions, right? And that could be related to appointments, because a strategy session for me, is like a one-on-one Zoom call. And so for a broker out there or agent, that leading indicator could be appointments on the calendar, booked appointments, right? Whether, you have a 50% show or an 80% show or a 20% show, I mean, it matters. But once you know what KPI you're focusing on, now you can try to increase the other incremental things around it, like the show rate to appointment, because you're now measuring it. And that's just so important. So, what's like an example of a leading indicator that you focus on and that you plan and you measure?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess I manage it for different aspects of my team, but related to this industry, one thing that we did in when COVID hit is we shifted. We used to do a lot of presentations, and that would be through boards, associations, brokerages, and they were educationally based presentations, but they were usually live. And we quickly pivoted to doing webinars and podcasts and educationally based webinars. I would say would be the biggest thing with associations and with brokerages across North America. And, getting the word out in terms of iGUIDE. And again, not in a pitchy or selling it, but we would teach about how to properly measure a home and understand what it is that you're measuring and what those measurements meant. It's not the most terribly exciting conversation, but it's an important one to know and understand as a broker, or how to get the most out of your virtual listing. How do you, I talk about, stage, share, and show. You get all your digital assets together, then you share it. You share it via social media. You share it by getting it on the search portals like Zillow, Realtor.com, all these search portals. And then you show results from the analytics. So I have I did a lot of that initially, but now I have a guy on my team that's doing these presentations. And so it's getting, how many can you get in a month? Can we increase that? And that's going to lead to, greater adoption and awareness on iGUIDE. And that's a small one, but that's just, I guess, one is an example. So
it's a great example of a leading indicator. It's something you can control. And if you notice, listeners out there, he didn't focus on revenue at the end, right? And I know that a lot of my listeners are already aware of this, to not just focus on, hey, I want to go from 80 million to 100 million in annual gross transactions. Like, how do I do that? Right. And just, let's just, I don't know, let's blast out and let's do this, let's do that. Let's increase our revenue on TV or whatever. It's like, well, really, the leading indicator is phone calls.
Yeah.
Like if you increase the amount of outgoing phone calls and divide it by your team, and you break that down on a daily basis, it's not going to be that many more, but that leading indicator will set more appointments, and then it will increase the revenue because you'll close more of those appointments to buyer broker agreements, listing agreements, etc. So focusing on the beginning of the funnel and things that you can control. And if it gets to the point where you're like, well, we've called through everyone, well, now the other lever to pull is lead generation. So, okay, right, you're still focusing on phone calls, but how do we increase opportunity volume? Right, and have more opportunities to call or appointments to set. And so it's a really key aspect of any type of business. And I'm glad that you brought that up. The leading indicators, the ones that drive the lag indicators, because it's super fun to talk about a commission check or the revenue you did last year, but what actually gets you there are those daily actions. And that's what this podcast is all about.
That's great. Yeah. And evaluating it too every once in a while, like how is it going, right? So we have daily, again, with my sales team, I have daily calls with them and we go through their activities. And, it's both a combination of outbound and inbound. So it's important to make sure that you're managing those, tracking those, and then evaluating how well is it working. So what's my close rate, or what's your close rate on that? So
you seem like you've read a personal development book or two. So I'm curious what are 1 to 3 books that have greatly influenced your life or career?
Good question. I probably should have been prepared for this one. To be truthful, recently I've been reading more books on personal health and awareness. I found just dealing again with lockdown, it's trying to get back into a good state. And I guess I'll share maybe a couple personal ones. I just read one on why we sleep, which was really good. I don't sleep very well and I need to sleep better. So I find that, more sleep helps just cognitive ability and has been great. Another one that is more kind of spiritual on the side is Alan Watts. He has a lecture called, Does It Do You or Do You Do It? And I've listened to this over and over again, or read it over and over again, both over the last, 20, 30 years. It's an amazing lecture. But I guess in terms of business, I read one just recently called It Simplifies Marketing, I think, for a lot of people, and actually might be useful to someone who's kind of new to the world of sales and marketing. Marketing Made Simple, that's what it's called. And it's very clear. It keeps you focused. If you follow his plan, he simplifies the process, I think, for anybody new getting into sales and marketing. If you want to understand how to kind of tie or connect all the dots in what your marketing plan is and what you're trying to do. And I think that one would be useful. I guess it wouldn't say it influenced my life, but I think it would be a useful one for your listeners.
Yeah, I like that. And I love the Alan Watts reference. There are so many personal development coaches over the past, or philosophers that have more recently become circulated in media. And I appreciate that they're kind of being revived. Even Jim Rohn, I've heard a lot of his motivational little 10-minute segments, and I love his style. Another one, of course, our kind of like godfather of our generation, Tony Robbins, right? Amazing. He has this pyramid, and there's these different layers of the pyramid. And the bottom one is your physical body. Like, your physical body sets the tone and the foundation for the rest of your productivity and success. So, the fact that you've been reading a lot of books around sleep, nutrition, things of that nature, that makes total sense, because you could have other pieces of the puzzle. You could even have the money. But if your physical body is spent and you're going to pass away tomorrow, well, what do you really have, right? And so I've been huge on that. I'm actually consider myself a bit of a biohacker. I've followed, Tim Ferriss, Dave Asprey, and like so many of the guys that do this stuff where, I try and think about, like, if my body is a Formula One race car and it's super high performance, best in world, at least that's what I want it to be in terms of what I can demand from it and the productivity I get out of it. Well, it needs maintenance, and it also needs the best fuel in the world in order to do that. And if you're putting in low octane fuel, the engine's going to explode, right? You may make it a couple laps, but literally it will blow up. So with that being said, I'm very, bringing that back to nutrition and sleep and all these things. I've done it to where I've worked 100-hour weeks and slept 5 hours a night and lived on coffee. And then I've done it to where I am today. I have a much more balanced schedule. And I actually produce and manage more today than when I was just grinding it out, 10 years ago as a young kid trying to make it. So it can be done, and focusing on that physical being first and really taking care of yourself nutritionally and with sleep and everything is so key. So I'm really glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I think it's important. I kind of fell out of it a bit here, and that's why I'm kind of refocusing. I find it a bit of a roller coaster ride sometimes, and that, COVID brought me into a little bit of a trough where, because I'm working from home, I'm working mornings, I'm working days, and I'm working nights. And so I just started to work as opposed to, well, I can't go to the gym, so I'll just, do an email. And
yeah,
get into, I think.
Yep, I totally understand. And I'm curious, because when someone's looking at success from the outside, it's easy to compare and look at it like an overnight success because you don't know that person's story. So how has a failure or an apparent failure set you up for future success? Do you have like a favorite failure of yours?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I have a few. And that's where you'll learn, right? Like small failures, big failures. Mine was in a negotiation when I was in the consumer packaged goods world and had to take a price increase. This was 2009 or 07 when what had happened, FX, I guess, just make a long story short, Canadian dollar dropped versus the US dollar. I bought goods in US dollar. I had to take a price increase to my customers, and I handled it better with certain accounts than others. And my first one, I didn't go in with a plan. I just basically, went in with a price increase without a plan to show them how to move through it and get to the other end. And that was probably, thank God it wasn't my biggest customer. So I learned right there is that I need to have a plan to negotiate that. And so it's a little ambiguous, but it taught me that you don't just deliver bad news. If you can come in with an action plan to work together, a lot of your customers are going to work with you. In any business that I've been in, is if you're trying to negotiate something to get to, from point A to point B, there's not one straight way path there. There's many ways to get to that, or there's not two solutions. There could be three or four. And so working through what the different opportunities are to get to that point, I think is key. And so I don't know if that was too ambiguous, but
no, it makes sense. And I think that I can kind of bring that home for our listeners as well, because from an outside perspective, what I see when it comes to arriving at a client with bad news, but having a plan for how they can get through it, get out of it, or work with it, is having the client's best interests in mind, which is the fiduciary responsibility that an agent has for their client in the real estate process, right? We have a fiduciary responsibility as real estate professionals to do what's best for our client, help them get through any situation. So whatever it is, if you're delivering that bad news, I think the key takeaway here is don't deliver that bad news and then just try to maybe change the subject, bring up another listing. It's like, okay, really think about them, their end, their perspective, and then how they can work with this news to get through it. Not only understand it and let you off the hook, but also show them that you care by, here are 2-3 options that I've come up with that could actually turn this into a positive, right? That could turn this into an opportunity. I know this is bad news, but I've done some work ahead of time to think about what we could do next, right? I think that just shows so much more willingness to go above and beyond for them. And that will really increase the relationship between you two. Sometimes in those moments is when the relationship is really solidified, in my experience.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, and that's one thing that I've seen that, and not to bring it back to real estate, but bring it back to real estate. And in terms of the iGUIDE, we're in a crazy market right now, and it's especially in my local market, but I think we're seeing this across North America. There's a lot of hot markets right now. There's not a lot of inventory, and homes are moving very fast. And, when it was the flip side of that, people were able to go in and, people weren't necessarily always getting exactly what they wanted for their home and the price that they wanted for the home. But the ability to walk through and show them that this is what we've done. This is how many people looked at your home. This is how many people were interested in staying in your home. This is where it ties back to the analytics. You can deliver that message that feel good about the price for your home. You got more than what your neighbors got, or what we had a lot of viewing and a lot of interest in this property. So it wasn't because of the lack of interest. Now, on the flip side, that we're seeing that these markets are hot, people are able to use these tools to go back in and really say, oh, okay, I understand more about this property. I'm seeing the value that you're bringing to the table. And now you're able to have these conversations with people up front that, you may not get this property because it is a very nice property. Like homes are being bully bidded or going way overpriced. And so let's take another good look at it. What are you willing to step up to in order to, if you really want this property? And it's now you're working together to come to that consensus or that decision.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate the ability to, give the client data and then have more accuracy throughout the whole process, but then, still have that caring relationship with them to be able to then explain it, connect over it, and just offer better service. So I think it is once again, it's a no-brainer. And I am curious, as far as investments go, it could be something small, it could be something big, it could be non-financial, but what's one of the best investments that you've ever made?
Investment. Property, probably. I own an investment property that I've owned for probably 30 years. So even if it did drop in terms of it's probably one of the better investments that I've had. So real estate in general, I think I've tried to diversify as much as possible, I guess, in a sense. Asset allocation is Ray Dalio who talks about that in terms of, investing in different markets and different asset classes and different, so I've tried to balance that out. But yeah, I think in terms of if I want to look at probably my individual home and my rental property, those have been great investments. So
I love that. I'm glad you mentioned Ray Dalio and asset allocation. It seems like we have consumed a lot of similar training, because I literally have written out from an audio that I listened to 100 times the asset allocation in these 3 different buckets for my exact asset allocation. And when things grow or shrink or whatever, I can then every 6 months or a year reallocate to even that asset allocation back out. Because one of the biggest lessons from the recession was if you're all in on something and it drops, well, where do you go from there, right? And that's kind of Ray Dalio's mantra is like asset allocation. If you're never over leveraged, if you are true to your asset allocation, you'll never be in trouble. So that always just stuck with me. And I was like, oh, wow, like that's something I need to really invest in and think about. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
You know that very well. So I think I need to re-listen to it again. That's, very concise.
Thanks. I'm happy to share it with you, at least my breakdown of, the different buckets. And I showed it to my fiduciary and he said, I've never seen someone put together asset allocation in this visual way. He's like, can you email that to me so I can show it to my clients? And this is a fiduciary for Northwestern Mutual. I was like, I don't care. I hope it helps someone. So yeah, I'll send that out to you for sure. Is there a question I should have asked or, anything you'd like to expand on from earlier?
I think what's interesting for me in this industry is just, not necessarily a question. I guess I wouldn't mind expanding on in terms of what we're seeing in the market. Because I think it's exciting. It's exciting that we're seeing, what we're seeing in the residential real estate world, we're starting to see in other and more in the commercial real estate world and insurance and in, restoration contracting is that people want to still, there are tools out there. And in particular, our tools is empowering people with the spaces that they own or they manage. And we're continuing to see that grow and that shift. So when I came into this industry about 4.5 years ago, people didn't quite get it outside of residential real estate. And even in residential real estate, there was a lot of agents that weren't, necessarily doing it. We had a lot of top agents that were doing it because they said that, this is part of my brand. I'm going to do, if it's $100,000 home or $1 million home, I'm doing the same marketing package for all my clients. I'm bringing all this value to my clients. And they get that. They got that message and they're the ones who taught me it and understanding it. Now we're starting to see this shift, especially with COVID is accelerating that people are starting to understand I can use this technology in so many different ways to repurpose space, to redesign space, to understand and virtually visit spaces so I don't have to leave my office, my home, make decisions. And, one interesting thing that we've seen here is using our tech now for expansions of properties that they're working on. Previously, they would have to have people come in and walk and do these, bid on the process. And part of the mandatory process was to walk through the space. What has expanded is now they're using our tech just to have people virtually walk through the space. And that's increased the amount of people that could bid on the jobs. People from Toronto and from organizations and construction companies from further out are now bidding on these projects because they are such large projects. There's only a few companies that can and or will. And so it's made it more competitive. It's made the process a lot simpler and easier. And as we grow this adoption, we're seeing how creative people can be when they're using these types of technology. I'm talking about our technology specifically, but because I'm in this space and I've talked to a lot of other technology companies, it's just interesting to see how creative people can get with technology and repurposing it for other uses. And so it's a fun time to kind of be, in a non-fun time, it's a fun time to see how people are really embracing technology from Zoom calls and to engaging with customers in all sorts of industries and fashions and forms. So I think it's just, it's a fun time for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the connection between technology and creativity. That's something that definitely resonates with me because I just kind of grew up with technology, but I'm also highly creative. I have a background in music. Actually, the jingle for this podcast I wrote and produced myself.
Oh, that's great.
So I always look at things in that way. It's you learn the tool and then you apply your mind to how many different applications or how creative can I get in order to have this tool serve me, serve my customer, reduce cost, increase sales, whatever the tool does. It's like, how creative can we get in order to then now use this tool? So that's awesome. Thanks for wrapping up with that. How can listeners contact you?
Well, they can go to goiguide.com, probably the best place, and just reach out to us directly there. If they want to reach out to me, Michael Vervena, they can just ask to connect with me and my team will put them in touch with me. Or if you want to know more about the technology, goiguide.com.
Awesome. Michael Vervena, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. And, the iGUIDE technology seems like a no-brainer. So, listeners, go check it out, see if it's a good fit for you. And we will be back in another couple of days with another episode of Lockbox. Thanks again, Michael.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening. If you want to accomplish your real estate goals, then I highly suggest downloading my free Ultimate Real Estate Goal Setting Framework. The link is in the description of the show, and it will help you break down your annual income goal into the amount of phone calls, appointments, or open houses you need in order to achieve that goal. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.